The strategy of what they're trying to accomplish is very simple. Remove the financial incentive for making gun videos. If creators like us can't make any money off the content, then the content dries up. And if the content dries up, then the culture dies off. That's the play, and it's their way of doing whatever they can to essentially destroy the Second Amendment in our country. I call it digital terrorism. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Podcast US, presented by Guns Magazine and sponsored by our good friends at Ruger. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat with the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. Well, today is a rare appearance. The interesting person we're going to have on the show is me. Roy's taking a little time off this week, and that's fine because there's something I need to talk to you about anyway. Before we do that, while we still can, hint, hint, here's a quick message from our sponsor, Ruger.
Looking for a firearm that's rugged, reliable, and built in America? Ruger Firearms has been trusted by shooters for generations, offering everything from hunting rifles to everyday carry handguns. Whether you're on the range, in the field, or protecting your home, Ruger delivers durability and performance you can count on. Discover the full lineup, explore new releases, and see why Ruger continues to set the standard. Visit Ruger.com today.
Well, today's short episode is about this platform's ongoing war against gun video. And yes, we've been snagged again. Now, I'm not going to name the company that we're talking about because I don't want to feed the algorithm anymore. But if you're watching this, you already know what we're talking about. In other words, if you're here, you're here. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or one of those other audio-only channels, I'd say stick with us. You need to hear this out because this really affects everybody in the 2A community, not just the folks who watch us on where, between the cat videos and those unskippable constipation advertisements. So let's talk about the timeline of what happened and how we got where we are. On August 16th of this year, 2025, we got a community guidelines strike on an older video. And if you're not familiar with YouTube, what that means is you're in trouble. Now, one strike means that you have to go dark for a week. In other words, your channel's still there, but you can't touch it. You can't edit anything. You can't do anything to promote it. It's just sitting there, and your audience is slowly withering away. If you get 2 strikes in 90 days, that's 2 weeks dark. And then if you get that third community guidelines strike in 90 days, your channel's gone. No ifs, ands, or buts, no questions, no appeals. You're just gone. Obviously, we call that the death penalty. So we had just gotten off probation, and then on November 13th, we got another strike. This one was for our video, Roy Huntington short, about the Taylor & Company Engraved Cattleman Single Action Army. For those of you that are familiar with guns, you know that the 1873 design Single Action Army is certainly a well-known gun that's used in many, many mass shootings and things like that. So apparently that's what ran afoul of this platform and its algorithms that search for that kind of thing. So just like that, we went dark again until yesterday, Thursday, November 20, 2025, the day before I recorded this. So that's the reality of being a gun-related video channel right now. So I do find it curious that we were up for 2 whole days and then we got another community guidelines strike. I assume it's just random, right? Well, let's talk about the bigger picture. So there is a bunch of stuff to unpack here, but here is the short version. We are the latest casualty in this platform's ongoing quiet and undeclared war on gun content. This isn't paranoia, and it's certainly not new. NBC News even did a piece on this in 2024, talked to some of the few gun channels that are bigger than we are, and they had run afoul. They'd run into the same thing, and NBC discussed it with them. So basically the mainstream media has even acknowledged what's happening. So this isn't a new problem. And I know if you're an avid gun video watcher on this platform, several other channels have either gone away or suffered the wrath of the censors at this platform. So the company that actually owns the platform, and I'm not going to use its name either, we'll just call it the Super Mega Search Engine Company, is, in my opinion, working hand in hand with anti-gun groups like Anytown. And the strategy of what they're trying to accomplish is very simple. Remove the financial incentive for making gun videos. If creators like us can't make any money off the content, then the content dries up. And if the content dries up, then the culture dies off. That's the play, and it's their way of doing whatever they can to essentially destroy the Second Amendment in our country. Now, the lever that this platform is pulling is a new, stricter interpretation of what it means to promote sales or link to sites that deal with firearms or certain accessories. Let me read the very first sentence in their firearms community guidelines. It says, "Don't post content if the purpose is to sell firearms or certain accessories through direct sales or links to sites that sell these arms." And then they go on to list the accessories, and you know the drill. There's some other stuff too, machine guns and how to build machine guns and other things. But basically, number one's the biggie and the catch-all, that if you're promoting the sales of firearms, you can't be on this platform. So, you know, the overarching problem here is they're ignoring the fact that firearms ownership is codified and protected in the United States Constitution. So let's go back now and talk about this retroactive enforcement that they are suddenly very fond of. I call it digital terrorism. It's the biggest problem is not that there's rules themselves. I get that. And it's a private platform and they're allowed to make whatever rules they want. But it's the fact that they're using retroactive enforcement to go after gun videos. They keep going back and flagging old videos. In our case, we just got a warning for episode number 127 of this very podcast. That's a couple of hundred videos ago. And it was actually a audio only podcast. And apparently their new AI algorithm can actually listen and transcribe the episodes. And they decided that we violated those community guidelines. So the problem that the GunTube community is facing is, how can we follow the rules when the rules are being enforced in a way that we didn't know about way back when? It's like they keep moving the goalpost, not only between the 1 yard line and the 50-yard line, they're moving it clear out of the stadium and then painting it to look like a fire hydrant. So that's kind of the problem that we're facing. And it's basically the idea of how can you comply with guidelines when they're constantly changing without warning. So, as I said, I call this a form of digital terrorism. You don't know when or where they're going to strike next. And here's something interesting that we noticed also. We only started getting this really heavy scrutiny after we crossed the 100,000 subscriber threshold. Apparently they don't care about the smaller channels, but once you cross that, that's kind of a big tipping number for this platform. So you hit 100K and suddenly you get a new set of eyes, even though they treat everyone equally, right? So, you know, here's what really twists the knife is the fact that they're also very arbitrary in this. I personally went and found a Wired magazine video that has 2.3 million views where they literally build and fire a 3D printed gun during a story about a recent famous accused murderer. Apparently that's fine. I guarantee you if we had even talked about it, we'd probably get flagged, but they actually do it on camera, demonstrated it, and it's okay. But yet, of course, like I said, a video discussing the historic single-action Army revolver, strike. So, you know, it's pretty clear. Some channels get a pass, others get crushed. And if you're a gun tuber, that's what they're going to crush. If you're part of the mainstream media and you hold certain left-leaning views, apparently you can talk about anything firearms related in the guise of education. It's just the people that actually know what they're talking about aren't allowed to. So is there a solution? Well, here's the hard truth. There is no solution, really. This platform that we're on is the bazillion-pound gorilla. Everything else, Rumble, Odyssey, Vimeo, you name it, they're good platforms, but they're tiny in comparison to the one that we're currently on, at least as of the moment that I upload this. Viewership everywhere else doesn't even add up together to part of a fraction that's on this platform. So I will say that we do maintain a presence on Rumble, and you can absolutely find us there. But being honest, the numbers are absolutely nowhere near they are on this particular channel or platform. So, by the way, here's a little pro tip. If you don't happen to see us and you wonder why suddenly there's no new videos, just go and do a search for Guns Podcast US. Sometimes the newest episode is hiding out there because, when we're dark, we can't announce anything. So we have some other ways. And interestingly, as I said before about the small channels, on some of our little hideouts, I guess you would say, we never get bothered. So go searching for Guns Podcast US, and I'll talk about another way you can find us in just a moment. So in the long run, we're talking about whether we want to move everything over to Rumble, like many gun channels have done, or do something else. I would like to hear from you because, we need to know, would you follow us there? Or would that be a deal breaker? Let's just be honest. It takes resources to produce a show like this, and resources aren't free. So we have to be able to monetize these videos either by advertising or sponsors or things like that. And if we can't do that, if we'll run afoul of this platform, we're done. So, and that's exactly what the platform is trying to do. It's pretty simple. I keep saying it, but cut the money, kill the content, kill the culture. That's what they're trying to do here. So let's talk about where we go going forward. We are pushing forward. Gun videos are absolutely becoming an endangered species on this platform, which is what the Silicon Valley technocrats want. But unfortunately, we can't threaten them with a boycott. Engaged gun owners are a tiny fraction of the viewership on this platform. So frankly, we don't matter. Plus, as a group, they hate us anyway, so they're not going to listen. Frankly, they would be thrilled to death if we all left. So where does that leave us? Well, if we move to another platform, we lose a huge chunk of our audience instantly. So what's a gun tuber supposed to do? I do think there's one possible remedy that might possibly work, and that is by calling on the administration and Congress to actually follow through on all those campaign promises they made and do more to protect the ability to speak freely about firearms on this platform and others. The thing is, legislation's not going to solve the problem. As we've seen many times, these giant companies can always find a loophole, or they simply just ignore the law until finally the government takes them to court and slaps them around a little bit and threatens them with losing a bit of their revenue. So suddenly they see the light and they decide to abide by the law. But I think that's pointless. Basically, passing a feel-good law isn't the answer here. What this is going to require is heavy pressure from people with platforms much bigger than mine and yours and the rest of the gun tubers. We need, as I said, the administration, our friends in the administration, and we do have several very good friends, and the United States Congress, Senate, representatives. We need conservative elected officials, and I'm saying, where are you now? I call on you to lean on this platform and make them understand that they're messing with a constitutionally protected right, and whether they find it distasteful or not, it's the law of the land, and they need to be more fair and even-handed about dealing with GunTube. So, my closing thoughts. Well, things are quiet for now, but the lesson is simple. The platform can silence us, but they're not going to stop us. As I said before, we are looking into some alternatives, such as moving to Rumble and maybe just putting promotional videos on this site. And that's what a lot of channels have been forced to do. As I said, I'm very interested to hear what the audience thinks about that. So please leave us a comment if you're watching us on that platform. And if you want to reach out to me, that's editor@gunspodcast.us. I don't really know which way to go with this. Again, it's the choice between run afoul of the censors here and get taken down and maybe off the channel, or we go to another channel where there's nobody and it's pretty hard to justify doing what we do because there's no money to be made. And it's not just the advertising revenue, but it's when we try to get sponsorships. Do you have 100,000 viewers or do you have 1,000? If you were a business owner, it's pretty simple math. So that's our quandary we face, and that's why I'm talking to you right now. So, as I said before, in case of emergency, you can always find us links to wherever the podcast might be living and hiding by going to gunsmagazine.com under the podcast tab, or, of course, our website, gunspodcast.us. And make sure you don't go .com. We get some questions about that. It's gunspodcast.us. I actually liked that web address better than the other, so make sure you check that out. And of course, we've got merch and some other fun stuff and blogs and all that. So anyway, gunsmagazine.com, the blog section, or gunspodcast.us. But bottom line is, as long as you want to hear content about your constitutionally protected right, we're going to find a way to keep bringing it to you. There may only be 3 of you out there by the time we get done, but we're going to do all we can until it's just impossible to do anymore. So that's the situation. It'll be interesting to see how long this video stays up because I'm thumbing my nose at this particular platform, and they probably won't like that. As we've discovered, it's interesting. If you appeal any of these rulings, you will instantly suffer the wrath. So I get it. It's a privately owned platform. They can do what they want, but they're wrong, and the people that are running it are wrong. And we need to figure out a way to do something so that we can continue talking about guns. As I said, if they remove the videos, they kill the culture, and the Second Amendment dies from lack of support. So I appreciate you listening to this short rant that I have. I hope Roy's going to be back next week. I hope I'm going to be back next week. But as I said, if you can't find us, make sure you go to gunsmagazine.com, the podcast tab, or Guns Podcast US. So on behalf of everybody who works so hard here at the Guns Podcast US, and yet we sometimes don't get to publish it, but they're still working behind the scenes. But anyway, as I said, I'm your host, Brent Wheat, and I'm reminding you once again, even if they won't let you talk about it, now get out there and get shooting.